Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely sunny day here in late May in suburban Chicago. It is May 18th. I know I've been a bit derelict the last couple weeks in posting my episodes. I don't have a good excuse except to say that things have been pretty busy, and I have been working on grading and whatnot, and I just haven't really gotten out and gotten a chance to record the podcast. It's just kind of the way it's gone. My daughter is at her swim practice, or her workout, and so I did walk down on Dannon Street, dang it. And so I am out for a stroll in a suburban neighborhood, which kind of depressingly got me thinking about white privilege a bit. I'm not sure that I obviously can't speak to the experience other people would have, but as a middle-aged white guy walking through this suburban neighborhood, I feel no trepidation that I'm going to get harassed or have the police called on me or anything like that. I guess it's good that I'm aware of my privilege in that regard, but it's a bummer to think about nonetheless. So I guess I'm infecting you with it as well. There you go. I wasn't sure what to talk about today, but I've been thinking about something. In the last year or so, I've played quite a few games of Carl Chudyk's Innovation on Board Game Arena, and I would say it's moved into the realm of a game I'm very familiar with. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at it. In fact, I lose more than I win, but I would say I'm pretty good at it, and I recognize strategies, and I have developed some as I've learned to play. I thought I would return to a format I haven't done in a while, and that's the Pick Up and Deliver Duel. So the idea of the duel is that we are pitting two games that are similar up against one another, and I'm telling you about each of them and why you might be interested in them or what you might get out of them. So that's kind of the idea. And I thought, because I've been playing Innovation a fair amount, today it would be a good day to do a Carl Chudyk duel. Innovation versus Mottainai. Dun dun dun! Here we go. Innovation and Mottainai are both multi-use card games with a small box, generally it's just a deck of cards, from designer Carl Chudyk, perhaps best known for his groundbreaking game, Glory to Rome. Now, Chudyk has a lot of fans. I'm by no means the first or the only person out there. In fact, the people over at Board Game Barrage talk about Innovation as one of their favorite games of all time. I don't know if I would go that far, but it certainly is very, very good. However, I don't see Mottainai getting nearly as much love, and I don't understand why. I think I prefer Mottainai, actually. So, today I thought I would talk a little bit about the two games, how they are similar, how they play differently, and help you get a sense of which of them you might like to try if you had the chance. I will also say Innovation has an excellent implementation on Board Game Arena, and as far as I know, Mottainai is not available online to play anywhere unless you download a tabletop simulator mod. So there's some problems there, or there's the challenge there if you wanted to try it. But today I'll be talking about the theme, genre, the feeling of playing it, the similarities between the games, and the differences between the games. So start with theme. Innovation purports to be a very small box civilization game. You start the game as a level 1 civilization with little to no infrastructure or technology, and over time you develop higher and higher technologies. Mottainai is in Innovation you win in one of two ways. You either get 6 achievements or you get one of the other win conditions in the game, which the game has a number of cards that let you win by achieving certain conditions. Most of those cards are from level 9 and 10, so you have to get your civilization pretty advanced, pretty far, in order to get to those instant win cards. So most of the time when people win, they win through the achievements. Mottainai is a game about running a gift shop in a Buddhist monastery, about making things to sell in the gift shop, managing the people who work for you, the other monks who do different tasks, and putting things on display. The game ends when somebody has 5 items on one side of their display or the other, and then you add up points which are multiplied and amplified in various ways. Both games, like I said, are relatively simple with regard to space and components. Both games come in double deck box, although Innovation has a variety of expansions that allow the game to be a bit different. Mottainai has one expansion which allows for a slight difference in the game, but doesn't change gameplay too much. In art style, Innovation is incredibly minimal. I think there is some art on some of the cards, but it's just line drawings. It's essentially not important or non-existent. By contrast, Mottainai has this sort of lovely watercolor abstract style paintings of the items that you're crafting. It's not entirely dissimilar from something like Tokaido, which has a kind of very clean, almost empty aesthetic to it. Mottainai has a similar feel. In fact, in style, Mottainai is very similar to the restrained Dutch graphic design of the Glory to Realm Black Box Edition. Both games, let's move on to genre. Both games are competitive multi-use card games where the cards interact in a variety of ways and you use them to perform a variety of functions. In terms of what people expect from a multi-use card game and what they usually get out of multi-use card games, I would say Mottainai is much closer to the kind of flexibility that people who've played Glory to Rome would come to expect, because the different ways that you use the cards are dramatically different depending what you choose to do with them. In Innovation, there are a couple different ways that you use the cards, but mostly you are either playing them or spending them, or playing them or discarding them. In that regard, Innovation, there's another game from Chudyk called Impulse, which has a similar multi-use effect, but still different than the other two. I think Mottainai is more satisfying in terms of multi-use card game because the levels that you can use the cards and the ways you use the cards differ dramatically depending where they are on the board. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the feeling of the game because this is the thing that I think divides them most dramatically. Mottainai is much closer in feeling to Glory to Rome, by which I mean to say you're taking turns going around the table and you're trying to build your own tableau while not helping the others too much and feeding off of the other players' benefits when you can. So often in Mottainai you will you will construct cards that give you different kinds of advantages, and when other players take actions, you benefit from those actions that they've taken. Now the more that you build into your engine to fit those actions that they've taken, the bigger the benefit will be to you. By contrast, Innovation is all about working against the other players. So instead of benefiting from the work they're doing, you actively have to work against the work that they're doing. Often with Mottainai, it's about trying to anticipate what they're going to do and set yourself up so you can feed off of it. In Innovation, it's trying to figure out what they're trying to do so you can stop them from doing it. Because if they do it, they are going to run away with the game. Now, both games have a keystone of Carl Chudyk's design philosophy, or a keystone element of the kinds of games that Chudyk designs, which is cards with outrageous powers. Now, in Glory to Rome, this is the case. In Innovation, or in Impulse, this is the case. In Innovation, this is the case. And in Mottainai, this is the case. There will be cards that you will get, and you read it and you think, no way is that fair. How can I possibly do that? And then you'll see a card that someone else has, and you'll think, no way is that fair. How can they possibly do that? I will say this experience for me is amplified dramatically in Mottainai over Innovation. There are things in Innovation that feel super competitive, and I'll come back to that. But in terms of the outrageous powers, there are only a few in Innovation that just feel out of control. For example, there's a number 9 or number 10 card called Nuclear Fission that allows you to draw a couple really good cards. When you play it, you can activate it to draw a couple really good cards. I think it's a level 9 card, and it lets you draw 2 level 10 cards. Level 10 cards are the highest ones. Those are the ones that can get you the access to the winning things. However, if you draw a red card, a red number 10, which there are, an even distribution of 5 different colors. If you draw a red card, you blow up the world and everybody goes back to level 1. It basically resets the game back to start, which is a pretty amusing way to set up the narrative of a nuclear meltdown. There are also cards that if you can get them to function right, pay off really well. Like there are a number of cards that will let you say, draw a card for every pile that you have spread to the left. So if you get 3 or 4 piles spread to the left, then in one action you can draw 3 or 4 cards. So, I mean, those tend to feel good. I've had a couple games where I draw a whole bunch of cards of the same number, and then I play a card that lets me switch all of those cards into my score pile, and suddenly I have like 40 points, which is kind of enough to win if you are keeping track of other elements. I'll take this moment to acknowledge here that I am not explaining how to play Innovation very well at all. It is a very complicated game, and I don't think you could explain it. It's difficult to explain in person. I wouldn't even want to try to explain it over a podcast. The same goes for Mottainai. So instead I'm giving you feelings and impressions, and how the game works can be left to somebody else. So that's Innovation. Innovation does have some of those overpowered cards, but the overpowered cards in Mottainai are far more common. It seems like most every card that you get gives you a dramatic power, dramatic advantage as you move forward depending how you play it. And so the game amps up really quickly. Now, one of the nice things about Mottainai over Innovation is that, in my experience, Mottainai tends to play in about 15 to 25 minutes, and Innovation tends to play in 20 to 40 minutes in person. So Innovation takes a bit longer, which means that if it feels like things have gotten out of control or things aren't resonating the way you'd hope they would, the game takes longer than you'd like. Whereas in Mottainai, if things start to get out of control, the game's probably over by the time you realize it, and then you can reset and play again. So, in terms of the feeling, Mottainai is a really interesting puzzle in which you're trying to get your system set up faster than your opponents get theirs set up, and really try to feed off of what they've said. By contrast, I feel like Innovation is about trying to find a short-term advantage that you can pump for all it's worth while you can. And then your opponent will counteract you as soon as they can, and then pump whatever advantage they have as fast as they can for as long as they can. So there's a game of sort of competing motives to really take advantage of minor advantages that you have. That's the general feeling of the two. I will say, Innovation is far more aggressive than Mottainai. Mottainai does have a few cards that allow you to interfere with the other player, to take something of theirs or destroy something of theirs. But those are less common. Innovation, that is one of the two main ways that you play the game. You either find an advantage that lets you rocket up the technology tree or rocket up the points as fast as you can, or you, while you're looking for that, you find an advantage that allows you to just kick your opponent's butt over and over and over again as much as you can. Those are the primary modes that you play Innovation in. So let's talk about similarities and differences in the gameplay a bit. Both games have interesting mechanisms in which you feed off of the other players, in which you feed off of the actions the other players are taking. In Mottainai, I've already mentioned, you get to take the action that your opponent took the last turn. And if you have built-in resonances, you can take multiple actions based on that. In Innovation, if your opponent takes an action and you have an equal number or more of the symbols that action demands, then you get to take that action first. So there's a push and pull in which your opponent is trying to keep track of how many symbols you have so that they don't accidentally activate a power that you can do and give you an advantage on their turn. In Mottainai, there are a couple ways you interact with one another. One, you're sort of keeping an eye on the other person's tableau, because at any moment, when somebody has 5 things in their on one side of their tableau, the game ends. So you're constantly trying to know how much time you have left if you're not the one aiming to end it. But there's also the give and take of, if you want to perform a green monk action and your opponent has a bunch of green monk actions in their assistance wing, then when you perform that, you're giving them a whole bunch of cards or secondary actions that they can use. And that part doesn't, it's not great if you're trying to keep your score above theirs to give them a bunch of actions. Both games also have a lot to do with hand management, with drawing cards to avoid, or with figuring out how many cards you have, drawing cards so that you can keep up with your opponent, trying to make sure that you have a good draw engine going, but also a good engine to move the cards around the space. So those are the ways the game feels most similar. I would also say these games are also best at 2-player. I've occasionally played Innovation at 3, or Mottainai, I think I've played once at 3. I really like them at 2. The game is complicated enough that at 3, or heaven forbid 4, it might get a little out of control. Finally, the differences between the game. Both Mottainai and Innovation are, like I said, relatively compact games, but it's the feeling of attacking that is fundamentally different. In Mottainai, you feel like you're working on your own thing. Yes, occasionally your opponent will attack you, but it's more like you're trying to set up a race in which whenever one of you crosses the finish line, you'll have more points ready to go than they have ready to go for their side. Innovation also has that racing feeling, but is often subsumed under the demand from the game that you just clobber your opponent, that you really have to just wail on them if you want to succeed. It is that kind of game. So, dear listener, have you played Mottainai? Have you played Innovation? What do you think of these two games? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269, join the conversation, and let me know what you think of these two Carl Chudyk masterpieces. I would be keen to hear it. I'd also love to know if you've played Impulse or Glory to Rome, and see what you think of those. You can reach me, Brendan, at rattleboxgames.com or Wombat929 over on Board Game Geek. I look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.